The first thing I want to say, in order to get this started, is that this just didn't happen and get started on October the 7th. That we're dealing with action and reaction and so on that goes all the way back, even before this century. And without spending a lot of time on it right now, we're talking about the displacement of people. We're talking about Zionists, people from course escaping from Europe and so on, looking for a home country. And they looked at various places, by the way, before settling on their choice, and that's the Palestinian territories, the country of Palestine, as it were. There's a lot to it, and when we go into the history, we can say more about this. But essentially, what happened is that the people from Europe literally drove out most of the Palestinians who had been there for generations, centuries. So if you want to know how this all began, it began just like colonization begins everywhere, where some force comes in, including the United States, by the way, and decides that this is going to be their territory, and that two different groups are really live there. So the problem that we have, in my view, is that the state of Israel, and I'm not talking about all Jews, and I'm not an anti-Semitic, but the state of the people and the government and so on, and a lot of people, really don't want anybody there but themselves. And a lot of what we see is not just even the return battles, for example, of what happened on October the 7th, but it's an opportunity to continue the kind of, pardon the word, genocide that has always been on the agenda of many people in the state of Israel. Now, I don't want to say too much about that now, because if we decide to continue, then we really need to have a series of talks and so on, where we really go in depth with history. But this is just to let you know that this is not something that just began yesterday or October the 7th. And that, as tragic as that was, and as horrible as it was, as horrible as what Hamas did, it was a terrorist attack. You can't call it anything else but what it was. But you're talking about people who, for generations, have been living in a situation of apartheid, just like in South Africa. You may or may not know, Palestinians in their own territories really can't, there's certain roads they can't travel on. That sometimes a hospital may be 10 or 15 minutes away, and it takes them 3 hours to get there because of the checkpoints they have to go. I mean, it's really awful. So I'll just leave it at that. They're passing out a map to show you the Palestinian, the territory that was the complete territory that we're talking about, Palestine, and how much of it is finally been allocated to the state of Israel. And as you see, what's left now with all the settlements and so on, it's almost even impossible to think about how there would be a two-state solution. But again, we'll talk about that as well. I've been heartened by Joe Biden and this administration's attempts to move the conversation beyond ceasefire and to really talk about a long-term solution and plan that will end this animosity. Now, I don't think it's going to happen until Palestinians are secure and have a place with self-determination and so on, just as we want for the Israelis. I mean, it's as simple as that. So, and I have one more thing to say, and then others can talk. I have a particular concern, especially for the African American community and my relationship to that struggle. To our peril, I think, we fail to see the connection, the intersectionality between the struggles. And I think that there needs to be, especially in a place like S.A.M, for God's sake, we really do need to be unkind and be vociferous in our own actions toward peace in that area. Because we're talking about the same kind of justice that we're still looking for here. And it was people around the world in solidarity with South Africa that ended apartheid. It didn't happen just there by themselves. It happened because people began to experience a sense of solidarity with those who were struggling. And that's what we Christian people are supposed to do, is to be in solidarity with those for peace and for justice. And so I'll leave it at that, but I think that, so for me, I think one of the primary things we need to do is really dig into the history so that we know we're not ignorant about it and just operating out of just reflection and reaction, but really understanding the process. And understanding, by the way, and I feel this way, we have to understand, as awful as things are, the trauma of the Jewish people and the experience that they've had over the centuries. And so, listen, if we really get into all of this, the struggle is really big. It's almost seemingly impossible. The whole world is feeling a lot of trauma, and that's the problem. We've got traumatic syndrome. And that's what's going on in the whole world. But if you want to know what's going on over there, trauma always gets passed on. And so that's sort of what's going on. So I think we need to go into depth in our own experiences and conversations and so on. But I think it needs to lead toward action. It isn't just about educating ourselves about what's happening, but what is the appropriate response to this congregation? Whatever that happens to be. And that isn't something that the rector will decide, that some committee will decide. The parish has to decide. Congregation has to be decided. So that's my 2 cents.
It has been said that every home in Palestine, you guys can hear me, right? It has been said that every home in Palestine, or at least Gaza, is not without a person in prison or in an Israeli jail. This was before October 7, 2023. Now it can be said that every Palestinian confined in an Israeli prison is without a home outside of their cell, and possibly without their entire family, who, if they are alive, they can't have contact with anyway. Our carceral state here in America and the carceral state of Israel are uniquely tied, and anyone serious about bringing the fight for truth and justice to the forefront of political action and spiritual restoration to our so-called democracy and our democratic state, our slaveocracy and our slave state, must contend with and understand that these people from across the Atlantic, from the land that is known biblically as Canaan, the land that was promised to the Israelites, these people did not get due process. They did not get due process, just like our ancestors and many of our siblings languishing in jails, prisons,